How's it going, everybody? Jordan, how's it going, man? I seen your video on the election and your video about the electoral college. And while I agree with for the most part of what you said in the video on the election, there are one or two things I wanted to add on there, and there are going to be a few disagreements we have. But for the most part, I mean, for those you don't know, I do have a deal of respect for Jordan Owen. I do believe the man's principled, honest. And while when it comes to the left right spectrum, we kind of fall on a little bit different ends. I think more on the authoritarian versus libertarian spectrum. I think we're more closely related, at least in views. Now, with the election that came up, obviously Trump got elected. Republicans control the House and the Senate now. And given the patterns of both the Democrat and Republican parties, I can understand some of Jordan Owen's concerns, because it usually seems like whenever a Republican gets elected, it seems like they're forgetting some of the promises they made to advance freedoms that their base desires, in lieu of some more authoritarian agendas that they may have. And the same is true for Democrats. This is why it's kind of hard to have libertarian leanings and have respect for either party, for the most part. Jordan was spot on about his analysis on libertarians. I mean, at least why he is more of a libertarian. It's a lot of the same to why I'm a libertarian. I have certain freedoms I value. He has certain freedoms he values, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the very first video that I saw of Jordan Owen's, the one that put him on my radar, was him defending the freedom of the adult entertainment industry. And it's completely understandable. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you do have people out there that want to impose some pretty bogus regulations and restrictions on the adult entertainment industry, and you do have people out there that want to see it go away. So I can understand Jordan Owen's defense on this. I'm in full agreement with him on this. I'm in agreement on him when he came out to defend his freedoms to play the video games he chooses. I'm in agreements with him defending the video games industry to choose which games they make. I understand his incredible disagreement with people like Anita Sarkeesian and Jack Thompson. These things are completely understandable. Just the same as on my end, if you've seen any of my videos, you'll understand that I happen to be a firearms enthusiast, and I happen to be a big defender of the Second Amendment and the freedom to overall exercise my ability to lawfully own and lawfully possess firearms. And I don't think Jordan opposes that. But as with the Republicans, they get in there and they ignore some of their promises to free up the market, or again, defend the legal ability to own firearms. On the same token, it seems a lot of the times that when Democrats get in there, they ignore some of their own promises. Big example. When Obama got elected in 2008, part of the thing he was critical over was the Patriot Act. Now, I can agree with Barack Obama on that one. But when he got in office, he took the opposite path. He not only signed the bill into law that extended the Patriot Act, but he signed a bill into law that expanded it as well. And this is where the left needs to kind of pick up its game, you know. This is where they should have said, hey, man, we didn't elect you for that. Why did you do that? You know, don't do that. We didn't elect you for that. And with few exceptions, for the most part, on the left, you heard crickets. When it comes to the SJW movement and the intersectional feminists, there were several people on the left that did come out and speak out. Jordan Owen was one of them. And again, I mean, that's something we can agree on and stand together on, when it comes to stuff like defending our freedoms just to exist from assholes who want to say, oh, you're a straight white male. You're racist, sexist, homophobic. And again, Jordan in his video illustrated quite well the fact that when you start calling people racist, sexist, homophobic, and all that, eventually it becomes like the boy who cried wolf, just to paraphrase it in my own words. He also, again, spot on with his criticism of people saying, okay, you're in favor of X, that's because you secretly oppose Y. He's spot on about that. This is, again, part of the reason why Trump won the election. So on and so forth. And, I read some of the comments, and it seems like, while well-meaning as many of his viewers are, it seems like some still haven't learned a lesson. I mean, when you start hearing the Republican people talking about how the Republican Party is racist, sexist, so on and so forth, well, it just shows that people really haven't learned their lesson. I mean, you're going to find more racism, sexism, etc. from the intersectional feminists and the SJWs than you will with the Republicans. Don't get me wrong. There are legitimate criticisms of the Republican Party. They're out there. I mean, and if you really want to change things, you have to actually identify the problem. Just the same as there are there are some things that the left has that are very good points, and very good ideas. The issue is that they also have things that they need to be legitimately criticized for. On that one. Now, we're going to kind of run into some disagreements here. Is one on the Electoral College. And I'll illustrate my point with a few pictures while talking on that one. While it is an old system, for the U.S., obviously, I think it's probably our better system for electing presidents. It's not always going to work out in your favor. It's not always going to be consistent with a popular vote. But I think it's better than any other system I've seen proposed yet. And I'll explain that. And the other thing is states' rights, although I'm going to be the first to admit it's probably a little mislabeled. They should call it states' powers. But I do agree that there should be a division of powers. And I think that for the most part, we should try to keep the powers a little bit more localized. And I'll go into this as well. So, on that note, while yes, local governments can be just as tyrannical as a massive federal government can be, or a massive national government, more accurately speaking, if you start ignoring the separations of powers between the federal, the state, and local levels, and just put it all up at the federal level. So, on that note, I'm going to get into why I think the Electoral College, while flawed, is still probably a better system than what we do have. Right, so, in defense of the Electoral College, and I want everyone to look at these pictures, by the way. As you see, that's Los Angeles right there. And, of course, the next picture is going to be Wyoming, and, and you'll understand that this is a pretty diverse nation when it comes to cultures, lifestyles, regions, how people live. Now, in defense of the Electoral College, it's really a better system than what we want to give it credit for. If we simply relied on the popular vote, well, people who live in this town, Paris, Texas, are going to get ruled out by those that live in large cities. And our president, the head of our federal government, is going to be beholden primarily to the people that live in large cities, just out of sheer fact that popular vote they outnumber everybody. Whereas people who say live out, here in Alaska, well, they're few and far between, but they do have different lifestyles. They do have different cultures. And what works better for those in LA might not work so well for those in Alaska or those out on the frontier. So this is why we need the Electoral College, and a popular vote election for the president would be totally inadequate to address the needs of all of the nation, to say the least. On the other hand, we could go with a one state, one vote, but as we can tell from this U.S. map, there are a lot more rural states than there are states with large popular cities or large populated cities. So on that one, I would say the South and the Midwest, as well as Alaska, would dominate that system every time. And it's just not going to work out quite so well for those who live in bigger cities. So this is why I think the Electoral College, while imperfect, is the better system. Now, on that note, a lot of people like to criticize the Electoral College when a candidate that they don't particularly like wins, or their candidate doesn't win. But so far, nobody's come up with a system that is in fact better than the Electoral College. As dated as you think it might be, and as imperfect as you think it might be. Much of my support for the Electoral College goes hand in hand with my support for, say, states' rights, or more accurately, possibly should be called states' powers. The U.S. obviously is a big nation. It's very diverse in the layout. We have a lot of urban areas. We also have a lot of small towns, a lot of rural areas, just a lot of different lifestyles all together. And one-size-fits-all government, a one-size-fits-all national government just ain't going to work out. I mean, we can go one vote, one state, but then, people, say, in Black Mesa, Arizona, and the Midwest and the South are going to be dominating people in large cities. That's just how it's going to work. And if we do it based on popular vote, well, the people in large cities are going to be dictating to people who live in more rural areas, and have more secluded lifestyles on what's best for them when they might not know what's best for them either. So we've got to have a balance here. I mean, we've got to be able to draw the line on what the federal government can and can't do. I know it's a great idea to have a federal government to step in on maybe a state that wants to violate its citizens' rights, and bring some freedom back to the table. But, I mean, aside from a few circumstances, when does that ever happen? Moreover, that federal government can be used to violate the rights of people within a particular state on the whims of other people in other states. So we have to be careful about what we wish for when we wish for a more powerful federal government to protect our rights. I mean, they did work out wonders during the civil rights movement. That was a good thing. But how often have they stepped in? I mean, aside from places, issues like D.C. versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago, which all they did really there is just tell those two cities that they couldn't have outright bans on handguns. But how well have they come to step in, protect the rights of people who in those individual cities were getting them violated by the mayors of those cities? You see where I'm coming from. So, I mean, while it's a good idea, it just doesn't always work out quite the way you want. We have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights, and I wish sometimes our Bill of Rights would get enforced a little bit better than they are, but until people start stepping up and insisting that, it's not going to happen. I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, the people in California aren't real big on concealed carry, obviously. And if I tried to conceal carry my G19 there in California, well, I'd get busted under a few laws if I got caught doing it. Whereas, maybe somebody in Colorado who wants to smoke weed, it's not going to work out so well if they come to Texas, but at least they can go to Colorado and do that. And yes, in the modern world, I know sometimes people don't always want to pack up and move, but guess what? They do. I know in Texas, we've had a large number of people come in from California, New York, and places like that because Texas is a job-rich environment. And they get, whereas California, New York, they're not doing quite so well. So it is possible. And on that note, I'm kind of glad we didn't have the same system being rammed down our throats as we did in California and New York. People were in practice able to vote with their feet, to say the least. I know I know a few friends from California that live here in Texas because they don't like the way things are going in their own home state. And they're out here in Texas specifically to exercise freedoms and have opportunities they wouldn't have in their home state. So, I mean, allowing states a little bit of freedom to decide their own rules may not be such a bad thing. And, I definitely don't like the gun laws in California, hence why I won't move there. Now, most of the Californians seem to love their gun laws and can't seem to get enough of them. And while I think they're violating their own people's rights doing that, and I know some gun owners in California that aren't happy about these laws that are coming up. In fact, my friend's dad, who lives in California, is really pissed off right now at Pop 3 because he's going to have to get a background check now every time he purchases ammo. You know? And while I'd like to tell the government of California that you're violating your citizens' rights, and I wouldn't mind seeing the federal government step in and say, hey, no, most of the time it doesn't go that way. In fact, if you looked at the gun politics, and I'm using the gun example because this is a freedom I value, right? You look at the politics there on that issue, more often than not, it's been people from states such as California and New York that are trying to get their policies dictated to the rest of the nation. It's not the rest of the nation sitting there and going, no, California, no, New York, you're violating your citizens' rights. It's been the other way around. So this is another good reason for me to say, okay, you guys need to back out. We don't need a federal government coming in to dictate to the rest of the nation that we should have California or New York style gun control. Another perspective you might want to look at are the marijuana laws, the federal ban on marijuana. It is state governments such as Colorado that's legalized marijuana for recreational use. Do you really want the federal government coming in and saying, no, you can't do that? That would be the federal government coming in to enforce restrictions and effectively take people's freedoms away, man. Just plain and simple. So, yeah, I mean, it works both ways. And one final note, man, I know we're going to disagree on this one. I know you said that you hope the electors go against the will of their states and vote for Hillary. I'm going to tell you right now, man, you don't want that. You don't want that at all. Just all this SJW crap, all the stuff that you've been arguing about, all the problems of the left aren't going to go away. They're going to get worse, dude. It's time, at least, for the power to change hands in certain parties. I don't buy that Trump is this racist, xenophobic, sexist. That, you know, I don't necessarily think that he is going to be a dictator any more than Hillary Clinton is. In fact, from my perspective, to me, Hillary Clinton seems more of a dictator than Trump is. I mean, Hillary Clinton and the DNC conspired together to rig that election against Bernie Sanders. Is that somebody you really want in office? And moreover, if the electors still pick Hillary over this, the authoritarian left, the SJW left, the regressive left, they're only going to be emboldened by this. They're going to be like, we can get away with having the electors vote against the will of our state. And they're still going to pick us. So, we've got total power. They're not going to learn their lesson, dude. So I think, yes, we should, at least now that Trump's won the election, give him a chance to hold the office. You can still oppose his policies. I mean, it doesn't mean we can't be critical of them. I know people who value the same freedoms I do were in for a fight for the last 8 years. It is possible to oppose bad policies, even though your person's not in office. But if we let the left continue to hold this office, they're only going to gain more and more and more power. And the very same issues you're seeing right now with the safe spaces, with the anti-free speech, with the whole kill all white men, thing, they're only going to get worse, man. And I think you know better. I think deep down inside you understand that. Even though you don't want Trump in office. I didn't support Trump there either in the primaries. I wish we had other options. But unfortunately, right now, realistically speaking, all we got's a two-party system. And we got to work with what we got there. All right, man. So you take her easy. I hope this information I put out, hopefully it'll have a little bit of an impact, man.